Hi, very glad to see you on the channel. Before you start listening to the story, write in the comments whether you like the voice on the video. I always believed marriage was built on trust. That's what Emily and I had. Or at least, that's what I told myself. She was the social one, the outgoing personality that lit up any room. I was the quiet dreamer, content with my writing, my routines, my life with her. But somewhere along the way, that trust had started to feel one-sided. It began with little things. The way she spoke to me in public, the eye rolls, the sighs when I offered an opinion she didn't like. She'd interrupt me mid-sentence during dinner conversations with friends, dismissing my thoughts as if they held no weight. "Matt, you wouldn't understand," she'd say with a laugh, turning the discussion back to herself. I'd smile, play along, let it slide. After all, what was the harm in a little teasing? But teasing turned to belittling. At a family gathering, I was retelling an old college story when she cut in with a smirk. "Oh, please, Matt, don't act like you were some tortured writer back then. You spent more time fantasizing about getting published than actually writing anything." Laughter. My father shifted uncomfortably in his chair. My brother-in-law awkwardly cleared his throat. I felt my face heat, but I swallowed the response forming on my tongue. Later that night, I asked her about it. "Why do you always do that?" "Do what?" She was scrolling through her phone, barely looking at me. "Make me feel small, like I'm some clueless idiot who doesn't deserve to be taken seriously." She sighed, setting her phone down. "Oh my God, Matt, are we really doing this?" I was joking. People laughed. "It's not my fault you're so sensitive." I clenched my jaw. "It's not sensitivity, Emily. It's respect." She scoffed. "Maybe if you had a little more confidence, you wouldn't let a joke bother you." That was her way, twisting it, making me the problem. And maybe she was right. Maybe I was overreacting. But something in my gut told me otherwise. Then came the book club. Emily had always loved books, but she wasn't the type to dissect literature over wine and discussion. Yet suddenly, she was obsessed. Every Tuesday night, she had meetings. Exclusive, she had said. Private discussions with serious intellectuals. I wanted to be supportive, so I didn't question it. But over time, things started to shift. She began dressing differently. Not dramatically, but subtly. New blouses, perfume she never used before. She'd come home later than usual, her eyes bright, her energy electric. "Tonight was incredible," she'd gush. "We had the deepest discussion about storytelling. You would have loved it." Would I have? One night, I casually asked who led these meetings. She hesitated for just a fraction of a second before answering. "There's this author. He's published, successful. He hosts the club at his house." Something in the way she said it put me on edge. I nodded. "What's his name?" She waved a hand. "Oh, you wouldn't know him." That was the first time I felt it, the pull of something I couldn't quite name. A shadow creeping in at the edges of my trust. But I let it go, until the night I found the first real crack in her story. She had left her laptop open on the counter. I wasn't snooping, I was just closing the screen when I saw the email subject. "Looking forward to our next private session. I have something special planned just for you." My stomach twisted. I clicked. The email was from a man named Nathaniel Carter. The name wasn't familiar, but the tone of the message was. Too personal, too intimate for a book club meeting. I read it again. Private session. Something special planned just for you. Emily had always been a liar in small ways. A rewrite of story to make herself look better. An exaggeration to make me look worse. But this was different. This was deliberate. I closed the laptop, my hands shaking. I didn't say anything that night, because I wasn't ready to confront her. Not yet. I needed to be sure. I didn't sleep that night. Every time I closed my eyes, my mind replayed that email over and over again. "Looking forward to our next private session. I have something special planned just for you." The words carved themselves into my thoughts, poisoning everything I thought I knew about my marriage. Morning came, and Emily moved around the house like nothing had changed. She hummed softly as she poured coffee, tapped away at her phone while waiting for the toast to pop up. I watched her from across the kitchen, taking in every detail, the easy smile, the casual way she flipped her hair over her shoulder. It was an act. It had to be, because no woman who truly loved her husband would send messages like that. She caught me staring. "What?" I forced a small smile. Nothing. Just thinking. She grabbed her coffee and slid onto the stool across from me. You should come to book club sometime, she said, stirring her coffee lazily. I think you'd find it fascinating. My grip on my mug tightened. I wanted to say, yeah, will I get my own private session too? But instead, I let out a light chuckle. I don't think it's my kind of thing. She smirked. Yeah, I figured. You always say you love books, but you never actually finish writing one. There it was again. The little dig. The subtle reminder that, in her eyes, I wasn't enough. I nodded slowly, deciding right then and there I wasn't going to confront her. Not yet. Not until I had proof. That afternoon, while Emily was out running errands, I sat down on my computer and did what I should have done weeks ago. I looked up Nathaniel Carter. The results were immediate. Author, speaker, literary genius, according to the fawning articles. He had made a name for himself writing contemporary dramas, the kind that critics ate up but real people barely read. He was married, had been for almost 15 years. His wife, Vanessa, was a well-known editor. He was well-respected, intelligent, charismatic, and he was sleeping with my wife. I kept scrolling, searching for anything that would confirm what I already knew. And then I found it, a photo from a literary event a few months back. A book signing at a small independent bookstore. There in the crowd, standing just a little too close to him, was Emily. I clenched my jaw. She had been following this man for months. My pulse pounded in my ears, but I forced myself to focus. If I wanted to end this, I needed to be smart, careful, and I needed to hit both of them where it hurt. That was when the idea came to me. I created a new email, a professional one that looked like it belonged to a publishing house. I spent hours crafting the perfect message, an enticing, too-good-to-be-true offer for a potential book deal. I knew exactly how to phrase it. Mr. Carter, we've been following your work for some time and believe your voice is exactly what the current literary market needs. We'd love to discuss a possible book deal with you, including a generous advance and extensive promotional backing. If you're interested, we'd like to set up a formal meeting to discuss the details. I hit send, and then I waited. 3 hours later, he responded. This is incredible news. I'd love to discuss further. When can we arrange a meeting? I leaned back in my chair, exhaling slowly. I had him. I tapped out my reply. We prefer to meet in person for serious discussions. We can arrange for a dinner meeting in 2 weeks. If you'd like, you're welcome to bring a guest, perhaps someone who has been involved in your creative process. I didn't have to say her name. He would bring her. And when he did, I'd be waiting. Nathaniel replied within an hour. That sounds fantastic. There's someone very important to my creative process I'd love to bring along. Let me know the details. I leaned back in my chair, watching the words on the screen, letting the confirmation settle over me. He didn't hesitate. He didn't ask questions. He thought he had just secured the biggest break of his career, and he wanted Emily right there beside him to bask in it. I typed my response carefully. We'll make reservations at Lemoore Friday at 8. You'll receive all preliminary paperwork then. Looking forward to working with you. Lemoore was the perfect location. Expensive, exclusive, and exactly the kind of place Emily had always begged me to take her, but never appreciated when I did. The irony wasn't lost on me. I closed my laptop, my pulse steady. Everything was in motion. The next few days were unbearable. Emily was lighter, happier, practically glowing whenever she glanced at her phone. At night, she stayed up later than usual, typing away on her laptop, claiming she was helping with edits. I didn't ask questions. I didn't let her see the shift in me, the way my patience had morphed into cold calculation. By Thursday, she was giddy. I have something big tomorrow night, she told me at breakfast. I might be out late. I sipped my coffee, pretending to be distracted by my phone. Work thing. She hesitated just for a second. Sort of. It's literary related. It could be huge for me. I nodded, suppressing my smirk. Oh, it'll be huge for you, all right. That evening, I finalized my plan. I went through her messages while she showered, scrolling quickly through the ones marked in. My chest tightened as I read the texts, her words dripping with admiration, excitement, devotion. You have no idea how much I believe in you. I feel like you see me in a way no one else does. Tomorrow will be perfect. Just you and me. I took screenshots. Then I gathered all the messages, formatted them into neat paragraphs, and printed them out in crisp, bold font, like excerpt from an upcoming book. Friday arrived. Emily dressed with careful precision, choosing a sleek black dress that hugged her in all the ways she knew would get her noticed. She kissed me on the cheek before she left. Wish me luck. I smiled. Break a leg. I waited exactly 15 minutes before leaving. Lemoore was only a short drive away, and by the time I arrived, they were already seated in a cozy, dimly lit corner of the restaurant. Candles flickered on the table between them, their wine glasses nearly full. I didn't sit at a separate table. I didn't linger in the shadows. I walked straight to them. Emily's laughter cut off the second she saw me. Her smile froze, her hand tightening around the stem of her glass. "Matt," she said, her voice too high, too forced. Nathaniel turned, eyebrows knitting together in confusion. He didn't recognize me. I slid into the empty seat beside them, setting a neatly folded stack of papers on the table. "Hope I'm not interrupting." Emily's eyes darted to the papers, then back to me. "What are you doing here?" Nathaniel cleared his throat. "I'm sorry, who are you?" I leaned back in my chair, clasping my hands together. "Oh, don't worry. I'm not a publisher. I'm not here about your big deal." I turned to Emily, enjoying the way her face drained of color. "I'm just here to celebrate." Her breath hitched. "Celebrate what?" I unfolded the papers, smoothing them over the table. "Your collaboration." The silence stretched, thick and suffocating. Then I began to read. "You have no idea how much I believe in you." My voice was calm, deliberate. "That's a beautiful line. Truly." "Oh, here's another one." I tapped the next passage. "I feel like you see me in a way no one else does." Emily sucked in a sharp breath. "Matt." I ignored her. I turned to Nathaniel, whose face had shifted from confusion to full-blown horror. "Does any of this sound familiar?" "It should. These are your words." He opened his mouth, then shut it. Emily reached for my arm. "Matt, please." I pulled away smoothly. No, you deserve this moment." I scanned the paper again, picking another section. "Tomorrow will be perfect. Just you and me." I let out a low chuckle. "So romantic, don't you think?" Nathaniel's face twisted. He turned to Emily, his voice strained. "You told me you weren't going to say anything." My eyebrows lifted. "Oh, so you did plan to keep this a secret?" I glanced around at the surrounding tables, where guests had begun whispering, their eyes flicking toward the unfolding scene. Not so secret anymore. Emily looked like she might be sick. "Matt, can we please—" "Can we what, Emily?" My voice was eerily steady. "Pretend none of this happened? Pretend you didn't throw away our marriage for this?" I gestured toward Nathaniel, who was now shifting uncomfortably in his seat, eyes darting toward the exit. I smirked. "Thinking about running? Smart move. I'd hurry if I were you." And then, like divine intervention, Nathaniel's phone buzzed. He glanced down, frowning, then swiped to answer. "Vanessa," he said cautiously. I grinned. The wife." Emily's breath caught. Nathaniel stood abruptly, stepping away from the table. I can explain." I didn't need to hear the rest. I turned back to Emily, whose hands were now trembling in her lap. "Dinner's on you," I said, standing. "Oh, and by the way," I reached into my coat, pulling out a second set of papers. I dropped them onto the table. "Divorce papers." Her lips parted in disbelief. I adjusted my jacket, giving her one last look. "No need to rush signing them. Take your time." After all, I gestured toward Nathaniel, who was now in full panic mode as his wife screamed at him through the phone. "You're about to have a lot of it." And with that, I turned and walked out of the restaurant, the weight of the past months finally lifting off my shoulders. I didn't look back. I didn't need to. The cold air hit me as I stepped out of the restaurant, but it wasn't nearly as sharp as the satisfaction burning in my chest. I had played my hand, and it had landed exactly how I wanted it to. Emily humiliated. Nathaniel exposed. The weight of months of suspicion, doubt, and anger finally lifted off my shoulders. I should have felt free, but I wasn't done yet. This wasn't just about catching her in the act. That was only step one. Emily had built an entire life around deception. Our marriage, her friendships, her reputation. She had used me as a stepping stone while she played the devoted wife in public and slipped away to a secret life when she thought I wasn't looking. And if she thought she could walk away from this unscathed, she was even more delusional than I thought. I drove home in silence, gripping the wheel as my mind spun through the next steps. Emily had always been careful with her lies, making sure she had a backup story, a new excuse ready at all times. But tonight, I had stripped that away. The emails, the texts, the affair, they were all laid bare. There was no rewriting this, no making me the villain. Still, I knew Emily. She wasn't the type to accept defeat quietly. I pulled into the driveway and sat there for a moment, watching the house, our house, the place I had built, thinking it would be a home for us. Now, it was just another thing she would lose. I went inside and poured myself a drink, the ice clinking against the glass as I sat on the couch and waited. Emily would come home soon. She had no choice. She could run from the restaurant, but she couldn't run from what came next. An hour passed, then another. Finally, headlights swept across the living room window. I took another sip of my drink. Showtime. The front door opened, and Emily walked in, her heels clicking against the floor before she stopped abruptly, seeing me sitting there. Her eyes were red-rimmed, her face pale, but she straightened her shoulders, forcing composure. "You ambushed me," she said, her voice tight. I raised an eyebrow. "That's what you're opening with." She shut the door behind her, tossing her purse onto the table with more force than necessary. "You humiliated me, Matt, in front of everyone. Do you have any idea how that felt?" I set my drink down slowly. "You mean the way I felt when I found out my wife was sneaking around behind my back?" "Yeah, Emily, I think I got a pretty good idea." She exhaled sharply, running a hand through her hair. "This isn't what you think." I laughed. Actually laughed. "That's incredible. Really? You're still trying to lie." She clenched her jaw. "It wasn't an affair." I leaned forward. "You were sending love letters to another man. You spent nights in his home, lying to my face every step of the way. What exactly do you call that?" She didn't answer. I stood up, closing the distance between us. "You don't get to twist this. Not this time. Not after everything." Her eyes flicked to the divorce papers I had left on the coffee table. "You really went through with it." I nodded. "The paperwork is done. You'll get served officially in the next few days, but I wanted to give you a heads up. You know, since you respect me so much." She swallowed, her throat working against the tension. "You don't have to do this." I let out a breath, shaking my head. "You really don't get it, do you? This isn't something you fix. This isn't a rough patch, Emily. This is the end." She stepped closer, her voice softer now. "Matt, we build a life together. You can't just throw it all away." I stared at her, at the desperation creeping into her expression. Not because she loved me, not because she regretted what she had done, but because she was losing control. "You threw it away," I said simply. "I'm just making it official." She pressed her lips together, her hands curling into fists. "You think this makes you look good? Playing the scorned husband? You're just as pathetic as you always were." I smirked. "There she is." Her nostrils flared. "I was wondering how long it would take for you to drop the act." I turned away, walking toward the hallway. "I'll be staying at a hotel for the next few days while I finalize things. Take your time packing. The house is mine, by the way. I made sure of that." She let out a bitter laugh. "Of course you did." I stopped at the doorway, glancing back at her. "You spent so much time looking down on me, Emily. But the funny thing is, I never needed you." I paused, letting the weight of my words sink in. "You needed me." Her face crumbled for just a second, just long enough for me to see the fear underneath the anger. And then I left, closing the door behind me. I didn't look back. I checked into a hotel that night, tossing my bag onto the bed without bothering to unpack. I wasn't planning on staying long, just enough time to let Emily sit with the reality of what was happening. She would spin in circles, trying to figure out how to salvage her carefully crafted life, but there was no fixing this. She had spent months building a lie, and I'd spent weeks unraveling it. Now, there was nothing left but the truth, and the truth was simple. She had lost. I lay back on the bed, staring at the ceiling. The adrenaline from the confrontation was starting to wear off, leaving behind something heavier. Not sadness, not regret, just the eerie quiet of finality. This wasn't just a fight. It wasn't something we could sleep off and forget. This was the moment where everything shifted. My phone vibrated on the nightstand. I knew who it was before I even looked. Emily, we need to talk. I locked my phone and rolled onto my side. No, we didn't. The next morning, I met with my lawyer. He was a sharp, no-nonsense kind of guy, the type who didn't waste words. He had reviewed everything already, the affair, the evidence, the house. She doesn't have much ground to fight this, he said, flipping through the papers. You had a prenup. The house is in your name. And given the infidelity, you're in a strong position. I nodded. I want this over with as soon as possible. We can make that happen. He glanced at me. You sure she won't try to fight it? I smirked. Oh, she'll try. But not because she wants to stay married. She just doesn't like losing. He chuckled. That's usually how it goes. By the time I left his office, the wheels were fully in motion. The divorce papers had already been served. Emily wouldn't be able to delay this, no matter how hard she tried. That night, I sat in my hotel room, nursing a drink and staring at my phone as messages from Emily continued to pour in. Emily, why are you doing this? Emily, we need to have a real conversation. Emily, you're being dramatic. Emily, can we at least be civil about this? Emily, Matt, answer me. I didn't. Instead, I turned off my phone and let the silence settle in. The next few days were quiet. Too quiet. Emily had stopped texting, and that worried me more than anything. She was planning something. I got my answer when my lawyer called. She's contesting the divorce, he said, irritation lacing his voice. She's claiming you're making baseless accusations. I let out a dry laugh. Baseless? She says there's no proof of an affair. I sat back in my chair, rubbing a hand over my jaw. So, she's really going to make me play my hand? She is. I sighed. Fine. Let's give her proof. An hour later, I was back in my lawyer's office, handing him a folder. Everything you need is in here. He flipped through it, his expression unreadable. Screenshots, emails, even a neatly compiled transcript of the text she had sent to Nathaniel, the same ones I had read aloud in the restaurant. He whistled low. Well, this should do it. Send it to her lawyer. He smirked. With pleasure. That night, Emily called me. I let it ring. Then she called again, and again. By the fourth call, I picked up. Her voice was sharp. You sent everything to my lawyer? I took a sip of my drink. Well, you said there was no proof. I figured I'd help clarify things. She let out a bitter laugh. You are such a... Careful, I warned. This conversation is being recorded. She inhaled sharply. Are you serious? I smiled. Always. There was a long silence. Then, finally, she exhaled. So that's it? You're really going to ruin me over one mistake. I laughed, shaking my head. One mistake? Emily, this wasn't a mistake. It was a choice. And you made it over and over again. She was quiet. I'm done here, I said, my voice calm. Sign the papers. And then I hung up. Emily didn't call again. 2 days later, my lawyer informed me she had signed. I sat in my car outside the courthouse, staring at the final documents. It was over. Just like that. No more lies. No more manipulation. No more Emily. I let out a slow breath, feeling something I hadn't felt in a long time. Relief. The moment I stepped out of the courthouse, I expected to feel a wave of finality. The divorce was official. The documents had been signed, the legal battle's over. Emily was no longer my wife. But instead of a sense of victory, all I felt was a quiet, unsettling calm, like standing in the eye of a storm, waiting for the next gust of wind. I didn't have to wait long. Emily had been too quiet since signing the papers. Too passive. That wasn't her. She never accepted defeat easily, and I knew. She had something left to play. The first strike came that afternoon. I was packing up the last of my things from the hotel when my phone buzzed with a message from an unknown number. You're a coward, Matt. You think you've won, but you'll always be the same pathetic man you were before. You'll never be anything without me. I exhaled slowly, rolling my shoulders back. There she was, the real Emily. I didn't reply. I didn't need to. But an hour later, a second text came through. I hope you enjoy being alone. You'll regret this. Just wait. I stared at the message for a long moment before setting my phone down. I didn't need to wait. I had already won. That night, I went back to my house. The house Emily had once made sure I knew was only half mine. Now it was all mine. The locks had been changed, her belongings packed up and sent to whatever place she had managed to find for herself. The silence was different now, less suffocating, more peaceful. I poured myself a drink and sat in the dim light of the living room, letting everything settle. The anger, the bitterness, it was there, but it no longer consumed me. It was just a memory of what I had endured, a reminder of how far I had come. Then, as if the universe was making sure I wouldn't forget, my phone rang. Emily. I let it ring. 5 times. 6. 7. Then I picked up. She didn't speak right away. I could hear her breathing on the other end, shallow and erratic. When she finally spoke, her voice was different, shaky, desperate. Matt, I don't know what to do. I took a slow sip of my drink, waiting. I lost my job, she admitted, her voice barely above a whisper. The company doesn't want to deal with the scandal. I tilted my head, watching the ice swirl in my glass. That's unfortunate. She let out a bitter laugh. That's all you have to say? I set my drink down. What exactly do you want, Emily? There was a pause. A long one. Then, I don't know. I need to talk to you. Please. The manipulation was there, woven into her words like a familiar melody. But it didn't hit me the way it used to. I wasn't the same man she had spent years breaking down. I leaned back against the couch. We don't have anything to talk about. Matt, please. I have nothing. I closed my eyes, letting the weight of her words hang between us. A few months ago, hearing her say that would have torn me apart. But now is just truth. That's not my problem, I said quietly. Her breath hitched. You can't just walk away from everything we had. I smiled. I already did. Silence. And then, for the first time in what felt like forever, I was the one to hang up. I turned my phone off, finished my drink, and sat there in the silence. 2 weeks passed in complete silence. No texts, no phone calls, no sudden appearances on my doorstep. It was strange how quickly Emily disappeared from my life. After years of her presence, her voice, her criticisms, her demands, it was as if she had evaporated overnight. Part of me expected some last-ditch attempt, some dramatic plea or scheme to reel me back in. But there was nothing. I kept myself busy, throwing myself into work, reconnecting with friends I had neglected over the years. My phone, once filled with Emily's passive-aggressive messages, now lit up with casual invites. A drink here, a weekend trip there. I had been so consumed by my marriage, by her, that I had forgotten what it was like to just be, to exist without the weight of someone else's expectations. But I knew it wasn't over. Emily wasn't the type to let things go. The first sign of trouble came in the form of a phone call from my lawyer. She's trying to contest the financial settlement, he said, irritation clear in his voice. She wants more. I smirked. Of course she did. She signed the agreement, I said. She's claiming she was coerced. I let out a dry laugh. Coerced? That's rich. She's desperate, he admitted. She lost her job. Her reputation is damaged. And from what I've gathered, Nathaniel isn't exactly jumping in to play savior. That didn't surprise me. Nathaniel had his own life to salvage, his own wife to answer to. He wasn't about to burn what was left of his world for a woman who was now more liability than prize. Emily had bet on the wrong man. I leaned back in my chair, considering my options. Dragging this out in court would be a waste of time and money. I had already won. But Emily wanted a fight? Fine. Let her contest it, I said. Let's see how far she gets. A few days later, I got a text from an unknown number. Meet me. Just one conversation. You owe me that much. Emily. I didn't respond. She texted again. Fine. If you don't want to talk, I'll see you in court. That was more like it. Threats were more her style. The next morning, I walked into my lawyer's office and told him exactly how I wanted to proceed. We don't negotiate, I said. We don't give her a cent more than what's already been agreed upon. He nodded. She doesn't have much of a case. It won't take long. And it didn't. A week later, Emily folded. I got the email from my lawyer late at night. She's backing down. The original settlement stands. That was it. That was the moment I knew she was finished. The fight was gone. The next day, I got a final text from her. I hope you're happy. I stared at the message for a long time before deleting it. I was happy. For the first time in years, I was happy. The first morning of my new life felt strangely normal. The weight that had once pressed against my chest was gone, yet the world outside looked the same. The sun still rose. The coffee still brewed. The silence still filled my house, but now it wasn't suffocating. It was peaceful. I had spent so long trapped in Emily's web of lies, manipulation, and gaslighting that I had forgotten what freedom felt like. It wasn't just about leaving a toxic marriage. It was about reclaiming everything she had stripped away, my confidence, my choices, me. I didn't waste any time. I made a list of things I wanted to do, things I had once put on hold because Emily either didn't approve or didn't care. First, I reconnected with old friends. The ones she had convinced me were a waste of time. The ones she had subtly pushed away because they reminded me of the person I used to be. I met up with Jake, one of my closest friends from college. We grabbed a drink at a bar we used to frequent years ago, the place Emily had always turned her nose up at. He smirked as I sat down. Well, look who's back from the dead. I chuckled, shaking my head. Was I really that bad? Jake took a sip of his beer. Man, you disappeared. We all saw it happening, but what were we supposed to do? You were married. If we said anything, we'd be the bad guys. I exhaled, nodding. I get it. He had me for a moment, then grinned. But I gotta say, you look better than ever. Like an actual human instead of some guy walking around in a daze. I laughed. It felt good to laugh. We caught up for hours, talking about everything and nothing. It wasn't until my phone vibrated that I realized how much time had passed. I glanced at the screen. Unknown number. I didn't even have to guess. I silenced it and shoved my phone back into my pocket. Jake raised an eyebrow. Still bothering you? I shrugged. Not for much longer. And I meant it. Emily had no hold over me anymore. No power. No liberty. She was just another person in my past, desperately clawing at something that was already gone. The next thing on my list was my career. I had spent years putting my dreams on hold, always prioritizing Emily's comfort, her schedule, her life. But now I was free to make my own decisions. I dusted off an old manuscript I had started years ago, one Emily had once scoffed at. Do you really think anyone will care about that? She had said, laughing as if my dreams were a joke. I reread the first few chapters, feeling something stir in me. Screw her. This story mattered. I mattered. I made a few calls, reached out to people in the publishing world. People I had once known before Emily made sure my world revolved solely around her. The response was better than I expected. Apparently, I still had connections. Apparently, people still remembered my work. And just like that, the pieces started falling into place. A few weeks later, as I was walking through a bookstore, I caught sight of a display table featuring Nathaniel Carter's latest book. I smirked, picking up a copy, flipping it open. The dedication page read, "To those who inspire." I let out a low chuckle. No mention of Emily. I set the book down and walked out of the store, feeling lighter than ever. Emily had lost everything. Her marriage, her job, her status. And me? I was just getting started. Thank you for listening to the end. I hope you enjoyed it very much. Don't forget to give a like and tell us in the comments what you would do in such a situation.